Hello and welcome to Low Code Cafe, edition number 143 for August 23rd, 2023. Today we're going to do part 3 of building custom forms in Plantain App, and so we'll continue to explore down on how to use context tokens in your forms, and we'll get into doing create and read and update and delete in data tables. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plantain App, and I'm joined today by Patrick Anderson, who is Technical Success Manager. And he'll be keeping me on track. That's at least the theory. This is an event we do every other week on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Central Time. It's an opportunity for us to explain to you what's going on with the product and to demonstrate product features and provide some demos and hands-on coding. We try and keep it technical for the most part, although these last sessions are a little on the introductory side, so we try and have a nice mix. We record all these episodes and put them out on YouTube. So starting from episode 140, however many episodes ago. And so you can subscribe there and catch up, find lots of good content on the various things we've demonstrated over the years. Today, we'll be running a simple agenda. I'm going to be talking about a few things that come from the trenches of support and then dive right into hands-on low-code development, our continuation of how to build forms from scratch. Do engage with us, though. You can chat with us or get into the Q&A window. You can raise your hand and talk. And after it's all over, you can give us feedback, what you didn't see in the webinar, what you'd like to see in future webinars. We will have another episode. Our next scheduled one is for September 6th. Again, this is a bi-weekly webinar. And so diving right in from the trenches, we're currently on version 1.25 of our software. We've previously released 35 hotfixes. And in this period, we're releasing one, and then I'll talk about a couple of other things that we know and support. So the one that we're releasing has to do with an advanced feature. There is an advanced feature of a product that allows you to put fields onto the form based on some logic instead of predetermining them in advance. And so you can, for example, run a query and conditionally add fields to a form. It's not a typical feature that most developers would use, but if you use it, the date and time didn't have the ability to add special options, and so now we've added that capability, and we work to try and keep all of our normal fields in line with these dynamic fields. So that was a change that we made. If you don't need it, there's no reason to install it. I mentioned last time, and I'll mention again, DNN 9.12, the platform underneath Plantain App, a new version has been released, and we have not yet, it's untested with Plantain App. We have indications that there's a conflict that exists, so don't be in a rush to install that. If you do, you should thoroughly test. You can always learn more about that on our DNN compatibility page, and perhaps, Patrick, I can get you to post that link onto the chat. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have added a breaking change notification. This is a small thing, but when you're moving from version 1.22 to 1.23, so if you have yet to move up, and if you're doing it at the same time, you're selecting our option that automatically installs the next recommended version of DNN, in this case 9.11. It might not install automatically, and so we're just giving you the alert. You might need to browse to your website name install/install.aspx to trigger the installation of the platform to go on. So that just will save you 5 minutes of panic as you're trying to figure out why your site isn't running. We try to install it automatically, but in this case, we're not able to. It's just giving you the road sign about how to go about that. Good. We do another webinar every week on Fridays, this same hour, and it's the Low Code Campfire. It's a meeting format, so you'll hear a lot of people talking besides Patrick and I. This is an opportunity to share what you're doing and perhaps the challenges you're encountering in your Plant and App low code journey, and get some help along the way from us and from your fellow low coders. So we do encourage you to join us in that. You can listen along or you can be very involved. We've got some great team members there that engage with us every week. It's one of the highlights of my week. So we have some other links for this episode, and I'll ask Patrick to drop those on the chat as well. So take a look. Oh, he's ahead of me. So you can register in advance for the Low Code Campfire. And then also you can get to our webinar recordings on YouTube, our community portal, which offers a great number of features. You can explore around there a little bit, but the main one is to get help from on any issue that you might face from not just us, but also the community at large. And then you can give us some feedback. So there's all that. So with that said, we'll dive into Plant and App Building Custom Forms Part 3. In Part 1, we just started covering the form building basics and explaining the settings and how to place fields on the form and things like that. And if you missed it, drop back onto YouTube, look for episode 141. The next one we did was exploring the different field types that are available in Plant and App Form Builder, and some common properties and some actions. We'll even touch on that progress today, but if you need to go back through that in detail, that's episode 142. So let's review previous episode. We took a look at the common field properties, like setting a title and an ID for your field, whether or not it shows. So there's a condition to handle whether or not the field shows or is enabled, what the short description and the initial value is, those fields are. We introduce you to some core tokens, the get token that gets information off the query string, the URL there up in the top of your browser. And we also introduce the user, so you can get user ID and first name and email and things like that. So a couple of core tokens. We made some changes in the form to initialize a field or hide certain things if you weren't logged in. We also spent time talking about these three sections that typically show at the bottom of field definitions. So bind expressions, user interface settings, and validation of your fields. So we dug into all those things. And then we made some changes to the form. So before we go on to what we're going to do next, it'd probably be good to just take a look at our test form that we have developed. So when we initialize this, the idea of what we were doing was that we're doing a sign up form on a website. You fill in the fields and click join, and it sends an email off to somebody to put you on the email list. So we can see that at work if we fill in the field. Hide nice information. And use our drop downs. We had a variety of field types so that we could see how things worked. But when you click join, it would send that off to send an email off and pop up a nice little, we call these toast messages that come up. And so if we were to check into the email, let's see what we have here. Well, I have a couple of them, but here's the one I just did. So we sent off an email to the administrator to say, please add somebody to the list and who we're adding and their experience and a field. Tell us about yourself that's not on the screen. The formatting things like making this blue and making this big and red, again, that was stuff that was covered in our last episode. We also added a button, show values, and this is going to be useful today as we explore what we're going to do next with data. So this just used an error message action that we're just triggering an error to just quickly pop things onto the screen. Again, that was covered in the last episode, but we can see all of our field values so we can understand how things come off the form, what they look like as you're processing the form on button actions. So we can see the name is Dale, the email address comes from the way it was filled in, years of experience is 15. We don't have tell us about yourself on the screen, so it's blank. The phone number was typed one way, but we see it a slightly different way without punctuations and with a 1+ on here. So that's kind of useful to understand the difference between what's on the screen and what's behind the scenes in the data. Our choice here for age, we were trying to illustrate a drop down. So the value for I'm an adult, we have words that mean one thing, but then the age, the value is slightly different. So it shows either adult or child. And then these publications, when you choose publications, show up with commas between them. That's the result of this checkbox field type. And then a radio box only lets you pick one thing, and depending on what you pick, it changes the are you a customer, yes, no, or I own many products. So that's the data that we have to work with. Where we're going today is that we will continue to our exploration of other field types. Specifically, we'll get that tell us about yourself field to accept HTML and let them format that a little bit. And then we'll go on and talk about a little bit more about tokens, what you can do with tokens, because this is where the programming, the low-code programming gets started. And then the exciting part about this, working with data, because what we've designed so far just accepts a lot of information and then sends it off in an email, and there's no record of what was done just as soon as they leave, just as soon as they push the button. It's not stored in data. So we'll create a table, an entity to store this information, and we'll put it in there. So that's where we're trying to get to today. So with field types, we've covered these ones in green already, being able to display things in a static text field, being able to display and get information out of a text box. Email works much like a text box, except that it enforces an email format. A number field that handled only accepting integer numbers. Large text is what we used for the tell me about yourself, so it was a bigger field. And then these ones that we're just looking at, drop downs and check boxes and radio boxes. The one we're going to cover today is the rich text Trumbo wig field. And this is going to be the thing that lets them input things with some formatting, some HTML type stuff in there. So now we finally get going. We hid the tell us about yourself field and only prompted people that are not logged in to do that. But to speed things along here a little bit, I am going to open the form open the administrative form, the manage form, and I'm going to do it in a new tab so that we can quickly switch back and forth. But I'm going to unhide that field. It's the tell us about yourself field. We currently have a show condition, and we only show it if the user ID is blank, and that means only showing for people who are not logged in. I want it to show all the time, so I'm going to make that small change and save it. And then we'll just take a look at what this large text field, how it renders, and then we'll start into Trumbo wig. So our show values will again show us this field with a error box, an error message. And so we can see, tell us about yourself. I am an IT professional. So it's getting the data off the field, but it's not allowing us to do anything like underlining or highlighting or anything like that. So we want to change that. You could put a new field on the form, add field of type, and the text. There is this rich text Trumbo wig. Trumbo wig, by the way, refers to this control is brought into our product as part of work that others have done and placed into made available as a tool. So and they called it Trumbo wig, so that's why we refer to it as Trumbo wig. So we could add that, or we can just change it. So if we go to tell us about yourself, you'll notice that while it tells us the type is large text, we can just go down here and pick that we want it to flip to a Trumbo wig. When we do that, some of the options change. The initial value gets to be bigger and things like that. And you'll want to be careful that sometimes when you change a field, things move around a little bit. So you're going to want to carefully look at your options. But this gives us some other options, what kind of buttons are available and how it handles certain things like lists and all it's set up. So you can play with how this is set up. But I'm just going to save it with just that one bitty change. Once that's saved and we refresh the screen, this now renders differently. So instead of that much larger box, we have a lot of tools. And so I can say, but now there's a tool like being able to bold. And so we get a slightly different look. We can highlight and let's see what else we have. We can change the text color to different, or this would be the background. So we have a little bit of options. And if I were to show values on that, I believe we're going to see that this is going to render correctly. So yeah, we start seeing this content here. When we this tool also gives this ability to view HTML, so you can switch back and forth between what it looks like and what it says behind the scenes. And so we can see that as a result of our choices, that it's put a span in place with some color codes, and it's using the strong tag to highlight that they're a professional. So just kind of what gets incorporated into that tool. I will say I am an adult and I'm interested in sales and promotions, and I own many of the products. And I'm going to click the join button so that we get the email. What I want to illustrate is that the send action, which we can, I guess we should review that now. We have a button called join, and the button has an on-click handler action. So when they click the button, it does a send email. It's sending it always to the administrator here, which happens to be me. We filled in the subject and the format, and then we have our fields. So, dear Dale, please add somebody to the email list. And so we have name and email address. Tell us about yourself, showing the about the user field. And so this is how we're generating the email. And if we go and look at the email in our inbox here, notice now that as this tell us about yourself is rendering with that formatting that they provided. So it's just a pass-through thing. The values are coming off the form, they're going into the email. In this case, they're going into the email just because we have this token about the user. So that is Trumbo Wig, and that's a nice control if you need that kind of capability. So we're moving on to the next topic where we want to start doing a little bit of programming. And the use case that I'm going to talk about today is that these people are signing up for a email list. And let's say that they're being referred from some other website. And if you can control the link on that other website that referred them in to sign up, you might say that the source of that is my XYZ website or my ABC website. And so that could be a source parameter on the URL. So we're going to take the case of if there's no source, we're not going to say anything. But if there is a source, we're going to build a nice sentence that says this listing came from the source. I mean, obviously we could just show the source field, but we want to demonstrate a little bit of programming. So this will be done by using the create updates tokens, which is the equivalent of a variable, but we call them context tokens, things that are in the context of where you're working. And so we'll create a token that will start with a default value of the source was not provided. But if it is provided, we'll override that with this came from source. Pretty easy task to do in low code, so let's get it done. The place that this is going to happen is, and I'm going to refresh to close everything up here. This is going to happen on the button. At the time the button is clicked, we're going to look around at the variables, see if there's a source. Excuse me, we'll look at the command line, the query string, see if there's a source, and then manipulate it. So nothing happens until they click the join button. So that's where we want to dig in. The join button currently just has this. First step it does is the send email. So we're going to add some steps and put it in front of the send email. And when you add, they add underneath. And so we have to drag them around. So the work we're going to do is, this is in the context area, we're going to create update token. And I'm going to click to close that up so I can drag it around easily. And so I want it to appear above. The token that we want to create, we can add as many tokens as we want, but what we want to create is the source statement. And I'm going to copy that because I'm going to use it again in a minute. But the source statement that we want to make is the default. No source was provided. So that's the value that we're going to assign. So if nothing else happens, the source statement is going to be the source was not provided. I could add another one of those, but I can also use, there's a clone feature here. So when I clone an action, it just appears at the bottom of the list with the same kind of setup. So I'm going to drag it up here underneath the last one. And this is going to be, well, let's talk about conditions. So conditions will determine whether or not this action will run. If the condition is blank, it always runs. That's what we've been relying on so far. But if the condition is not blank, it's expecting it to resolve to either true or false. If it's true, the action runs. If it's false, then the action doesn't run. So this is how we can conditionally override the source statement to some other value. Let's get it out of the way. The other value that we want to do is something that looks like this. We'll need to do a little bit of work, but we'll do this. To keep from getting confused, we might want to take advantage of the description. So this description is going to be something, this is words to myself to remember what I was trying to do here. So when this is all closed up and you're coming back to it later on, you can see what's happening. Oh, we're providing a default source statement, but we're overriding it. So you can open these up just to see what's underneath it. But if you're not working with that, they're all closed up and you can kind of skip past them easier. So we need a condition. And so we're going to rely on what we did last time. The get gets information from the query string. And so we're going to look at a variable called source. And if it is not equal to nothing, then this statement is going to run. So if they didn't provide a source, the first statement will have run, and the source statement will be the source was not provided. If the source is not blank, then it says this listing came from the something source. Now, this was just a placeholder. The thing that we really need is, again, the same value. This is the right syntax for pulling off a token. And so now the source statement is going to say this listing came from the XYZ source. We're going to do all the work here. Before we test it, let's go on and change our email and say that in the body, we'll say that the source, we can just actually add source statement here at the bottom because it doesn't need other words. It is a statement all on its own. It's going to say one thing or the other. And so let's test that out. Love for questions. If there are any questions on the question and answer or the chat, if I'm not explaining this well, I would appreciate knowing it. So we'll do this again, and we'll just use a slightly different name so we know that we have a new record. And I'm actually going to clean this all up. So I'm moving this HTML and saying so since our URL up at the top doesn't have a source, I'm hoping that this test is going to illustrate that the source state, the default source statement came into play. And so we'll do one that way, and then we'll submit another one. Tell me I signed. Yeah, I did save this. Good. And then so we do need to provide a source statement. So we'll say the source is Google. Doesn't matter what the source is for this purpose. So we should have two different email submissions that were done here. And so we'll take a look at that in our list. So this one has a source statement that says the source was not provided. If we back up to the first one, it says this listing came from the Google source. So it filled in the blank for us. So that's just kind of the putting it all together. We did a little bit of logic that said build a variable called source statement, and then conditionally update that variable to a different value if you had a source. Not too hard. Good. All right, we've worked our way through that, and now we can get to the fun stuff, which is working with data. So the idea here is that all we've done so far is created a form. If you fill in the form, it sends an email. Data is not recorded anywhere. If the user doesn't get the email, something goes wrong or it goes in spam or whatever, there ends up just kind of being no record of it. So we want to create a data table or an entity that's going to hold our data, and then in that same join button, we'll push the data into the sign up entity so that it's there forever. All right, so that gives us a new target. Let's talk about the sign up entity. First of all, that's provided in the entities section of Plantain App's configuration section. So we'll go into configuration, create a new entity. It's going to be called sign up. And then we're going to have all of our data fields. There are things like name and email address and years experience. And as we're doing this, we're going to have to decide whether or not what type of field is going to be. You'll get different functionality out of Plantain App if you tell it what field type is. So for example, if you say that the field type is a number, it's going to prevent you from saving a text value in that field. So and then a large text is a virtually unlimited length, whereas just a standard text field is, Patrick, correct me, it's about 455 characters, something like that. So you need to think a little bit about what kind of information is going into the field as you define an entity. So let's do that work. We will, again, this information is available on the configuration screen, and I'm going to open that in a new tab just so I can kind of flip back and forth pretty easily. So we're on our configuration and its entities. I have a lot of entities because this is my test system, but I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to skip some things here along the way that you don't have to assign a namespace. So I'm just going to select the default one that comes in. And what we're creating is an entity called sign up. When you create something, you have to do a singular and plural. So this would be sign ups. And you'll see this in use in some of the stuff that I point out here in a few minutes. Why we need a plural just helps make things a little bit more readable. I'm going to keep the default options. So this is going to end up, because I've left it with the menu turned on, this is going to create a menu option for signups. And so we'll be able to get to it very easily. The properties section is where we tell it all the different things that we want it to keep track of. So by default, there are these 5 properties that Plantain App keeps track for you automatically. It automatically assigns a unique ID. It's an integer number starting at 1, moving up. Who created it and when, who modified it and when. So it's a little bit of automatic functionality going on, but we're going to tell it the different things that we need. And then that's that list we were just looking at a little while ago. So there's name.
Dale, I wanted to toss in right here while you're here that you asked the question about the number of characters in a text field, and it's 450. And I went to confirm that, went to learn.plantainapp.com to check the properties matrix, and I pasted that link into the chat for reference for everyone.
Perfect. Within Plantain App, and we'll see how this comes out in just a second, there is a display name. You have to pick one of the properties that you add as the display name. It's just a requirement. And so I'm going to have the name be our display name. You're going to see that come out in a little while in some of our automatic content as being underlined and hyperlinked. So it'll differentiate it from some of the other things we're doing. We have email address as another field, and we're going to pick that as a field type of email. And so you're going to get automatically, again, some hyperlinked kind of capability. So you'll be able to click on it and start an email. The next one is years experience. And this, we'll just keep it matching what we did before. So it's a number, an integer number. That's what we have on the form. And so that's what we're going to put in here. We're expecting an integer. The next one is about user. And because this is the one we made to be a Trumbo wig, it could be very, very long. And so the 450 isn't necessarily going to do it. So we'll pick large text, and that'll give us a virtually unlimited amount of space to store that information. Next one is phone that we'll add, and we have a phone type, so we'll choose that. Age, if you remember, this one it's the one that says child or adult. So we wouldn't want to put a number for this. The text is a perfect thing to store the word child or adult, so we'll do that. And then we had the publications list. And here's where you could get into a little bit of, do I want to do A or do B? By default, text 450 characters. This publications list right now is pretty short. It's not even going to get above 100 characters, so text is appropriate. But if you expected the list to get very, very long and you're handling it as this comma delimited list as we've done, you might want to use a large text. So you got to think a little bit about what the container is for what you're trying to do. And then the last one is customer, and this had a yes, no, many kind of value, so text is also appropriate. There's a lot of functionality in these checkboxes, and I'm not going to dive into it too much right now, but it'll be useful. I'll pick a couple of them. It's kind of useful to be able to search within a listing to find people by their email address, for example, and you might want to be able to sort things by name. So I'm going to pick a couple of these, but not dive in too much. So we covered general, we covered properties. There's a whole permissions area that's beyond the scope of a beginner, but the defaults here are reasonably secure, and going to let you work with this information pretty easily. So we're going to save this and see what happens. And what is happening when we do this behind the scenes, Plantain App is doing a great deal of work for you. It's creating a table in your SQL database that looks like you've described it. So it's using the names that you provided. It's adding pages to the system that include that you'll be able to browse to and use to do this basic create, read, update, delete kind of functionality. But it's our default functionality. We'll explore that here for just a second and then move on to our whole point today is working with being able to do custom forms and to work with this content outside of what we provide by default. And it's not in a hurry to get this done. So here are the fields that we created or are creating, and then what's automatically going to be, we're going to look at. It's called CRUD in the industry, create, read, update, delete functionality. There's our form, and it's done. So we're going to go back to our form and refresh the page, and we'll notice that up here at the top in the bar, we now have signups that got created. So this is that default CRUD, and we can click into it. I'm actually going to open it in a new tab. I like to be able to come back to where I was easily. So we built for you a signups listing. It has the ability to add a sign up here interactively with clicking the new button. When you add one, it adds it to the list. Type one here so that we can see it at work. So there's a list. We have the functionality to edit it if we wanted to, so we could update it and add things manually, and we could delete it. In many cases, this functionality, this CRUD functionality, is something that might be might be all that you need. If you're doing a behind the scenes entity and you just want to be able to take a look at it and edit it, and you just happy with the way that we've provided it, that might be the easiest thing and you don't have to do anything else. But when you want something to look like you want it to look with customizations and lay out exactly the way you want it, you would go the custom form route, which we've been discussing, and then still use the entity and some of the tools that we've built for you to populate it. And so that's where we're going with this. So we return to our configuration. Oops, we don't need this one. We return to our sign up form where we I'm just going to refresh this. I had left the sign up form open in the time since we'd been away here from this form. We did an entity, we created an entity, and Plantain App creates a lot of good stuff for us. In addition to the things I've already mentioned, it creates some actions that you can use, like create a new sign up. And so that's where we're going on to now. We're doing the working with data part of this, where when you save this form, in addition to sending out the email, we're going to create a new sign up. And so there is this action, create new sign up, that's been created for us. So let's explore it. We have our form, we open up the join button, scroll on down to where we see our actions. And so here's what we worked on earlier. We're going to add an action. Now, I'm going to point out where these live, and then we'll probably use the search to find them. In the entities subsection, there is every entity that you create on your system will start adding actions that relate to that, to the entities. And so I have a lot of entities here, and it kind of goes on and on. We can see, though, if we look in the create new section, we can see create new sign up. So you can use this to find it. And it will, if we clicked here, it would drop the action into our list. But if you know what you're looking for as you're adding an action, you can start to type anything that is part of the action. And so in this case, we're working with sign up, and I want to see all the actions that have to do with signups. And this is so you can use it, find the list, or you can search for it. The one we're going to want to use is create new sign up, but I'm just going to point out that it's created 6 things here related to signups for us automatically, just because we created an entity. So there's an action that will let you create a new sign up record, an action that will let you delete a sign up record. If you want to change a sign up record just a little bit, just certain fields, that's a partially update. Read all would be a way that you could get all the signups and do some work, perhaps make a list of them and loop through that list. So that's a little bit more advanced topic. But if you want to read one sign up, which is a very common thing to want to do, you can give it the record number that you want to use, and then it will read the sign up for you. And then if you want to completely update the sign up, change everything about it, then you can use the update sign up. We'll touch on all those in a minute, but let's focus in on the action create new sign up. Again, it always, when you add something, when you add an action to this on-click handler, it always adds it to the bottom. And because we've added it to below something that is a final action, this display, toast, and stop, it's giving us this red warning. This is never going to get here because this action here stops the action, stops the processing. So just like before, we'll want to move this up above the email. It could be after the email, doesn't really matter, but it needs certainly to be above this display toast action. Our description for this is, say, data table. It could be whatever you want it to be, but just a reminder of what you were doing here this day. The condition we're going to do is blank. We always want to save the data. If this passes validation, it has to pass validation in order to get in here to this on-click handler. So the form has been filled out completely. We want to create a record. And now it's a fill in the blank experience. The connection string is optional. You'll see it here, and it's not a beginner topic. You'll normally want to leave it blank. But then there's name and email address. All the fields that we put on the entity are available for us to fill in. And so we can type values here or use values from our form to fill them in. And then there is a thing called an output token. And the output token is this is where you're going to get the new record ID that gets created for you back. And so this would be then available for you to do something with if you need it. If you don't need it, you can just leave this blank. So we'll use all of these or most of these to figure it out. But let's start filling in the blanks. So the name, in order to fill in the name, we will scroll up and see the name. We want it to come off of our form, and there is a feature here called copy field ID as a token. So the field ID is name, and we want to use it below. So we could copy and paste from that ID field or just click here. So I'm going to copy ID, and this is going to be a little bit of up and down, so hopefully you don't get seasick on me. But when we paste, it does this. Now, this is an area where you have to learn and be careful. It's just something about Plantain App that you need to know. If you type a value like name here, it's going to actually put the letters NAME into the record. If you want the value of name, it needs to be enclosed in brackets. So this would be the correct way to do this. And so we'll go up and down here and get each of these. So email address is next. And so we'll do bracket email address, just pasting. The next one, years of experience. So this one is pretty straightforward. I'm just grabbing all of my fields and sending them to the record. It all nicely aligns. They won't always be that way, right? Sometimes you might have fields that would be a computation, or even like our source field, our source statement. You might want to collect the source. We didn't build that into the data source, into the entity. So we don't have any place to store the source, but that's a field that wouldn't be on the form and yet would still need to go into the record. All right, so we filled in all the information that we want, and then that's coming from our form and going on to the data table. And then we'll go ahead and use the output token. We're going to call this the sign up ID. We could call it anything we want, but this is going to create a context token that has the record ID for us. And so in our email, for example, we could add into the bottom of it and in the same way, our toast message could say something a little bit cryptic to the user that is their sign-up ID. Again, it has to be in brackets. So we could visually show that. So it could be used in a number of different ways. Great. That should be enough. If we save that, this form should work now, and we should be able to test it out. We'll wait for that to say saved and refresh our form, and here we go. say John wants to know everything about us, but they don't own any of our products, and so we say join. Well, notice our confirmation message now has a 2 here next to it, so it did its work. And if we, I can't remember where I have what I have here, the email message that was just generated has sign up record ID number 2 was created to store this information, so we're getting this nice information. And if we go to the automatically created content, it's going to give us the ability to see this. And so we see all of our information, the name, the email address, the experience. It's showing up with, I've never used your software, but it's got this P tag around it. So we're seeing some HTML, phone number, adult publications. So this, and notice it is record ID number 2. So we have accurately stored the information. Before we move, so it worked. And so, quick review, and then I'll give you some extra information. We used the create new sign up action that was created because we built an entity and saved an entity for us. And so we filled in the blanks and got it to create a record. Very easy process to create a record. There's kind of an exception here that this works, but it works because I'm logged into the system. The permissions of creating a record in an entity, I just want to point out that somebody who's not logged into the system doesn't have any rights to create a record. So, here I am, I'm logged in. If I signed out and tried to use this form, it wouldn't work. It would give an error. I'm not going to do it right now, but I'm going to, if that's your use case, I'm just going to point out that you need to use the load user action that gives this that user temporarily gives them the rights to write into the database. Just use a load user and give them the user ID of a user that has the rights. But we're working in a logged in form, and it worked as expected. For the remainder of our time, I'm just going to talk and take a look at these other actions that got created for you. I'm going to do that by I'm going to add them to our click handler. I'm not going to save it, so I'm just using this as a vehicle to display these things. So we've covered new sign up. The next one that's there's create, read, update, delete. So I'm going to take a look at read. This is something that's a very normal type of functionality. You're going to want to give it a record ID, either hard code it to a 2, or maybe if you want to get it off the query string, you could use a get rec ID, and if they pass a rec ID of 2 on the query string, you'd be able to retrieve the record. But this is saying, go retrieve this record and put it into something called sign up or current sign up, whatever you want to call it. But this would give you access then to all of the fields from that particular sign up. So while we don't have time to get into it today, this would, if we passed it a 2 and current sign up, you would now have access to a token current sign up :name, and it would return name would be John Doe. So this gives you access to the data, and so then after the fact you can use that to retrieve information and manipulate it. So that's read sign up. Another one is update sign up. So the update sign up says you have to pass it a sign up ID. Which one do I want to change to? Or you could pass a token that says the value of the one you want to change, and then you would provide a value for every field on the record, and those field the record would be updated to have those values. I don't typically use the update sign up because by the time I want to update a record, I only want to update part of it, not all of it. And so a lot of times you just want to leave everything alone and just change the part that you want. So that's the partially update sign up. So again, you could pass the record ID to or do it through a token, and then you tell it what you want it to change. So you would say a new parameter and say that you want to change the name. And so now you could change the name to anything you want. Or if you wanted to change the, maybe the user has become a customer, and so you might change the customer value from no to yes. And so this would let you partially update and yet leave everything else alone. So that's a good, useful one. The next one is we can do delete sign up. I think delete sign up. And so this would just be if you provided a record ID, again, the 2 or a token that means 2, that record would cease to exist within the database. It would be deleted, and now you would not have a sign up record for that. That one entry would be removed. And then the final one that we created for you was read all signups. And so this starts to get into the programmatic access. And so if you just if you do read all signups and you don't fill in the blanks and use maybe create an output token called list, this would create a token called list that would have all of the signups, and you could do something with that. You could manipulate the list to maybe loop through and do something, count up how many are there, or make a big long list of names, or there's any number of different tasks that you can do. But read all gives you the ability to get into all of the different signups. Okay, we have a couple of minutes for questions, but other than that, that's as far as we needed to go today. Lots and lots of good introductory content. I hope that that's been useful for you. And of course, we'll put it out on the YouTube channel, and it'll be available for reference and for our new users as they onboard. Okay, if there's no questions, then I'm going to say happy low coding for this week. Happy low coding from Plant and App, and we will see you next time, 2 weeks from now. Thanks.